She said it the way she said everything, like she'd already run the numbers and arrived at the only reasonable conclusion, and the rest of us were simply catching up. The room had one bed. A king, to its credit. The resort had overbooked the retreat block. The front desk had offered apologies and a complimentary breakfast that neither of us acknowledged, and we were now standing in a room on the 4th floor with a single keycard between us and exactly the amount of open space that two people who have spent 18 months professionally disagreeing with each other require. She dropped her bag on the chair nearest the window, set her folio on the desk, turned to look at the bed, then at me, with the expression she uses in presentations when she's anticipated an objection and decided not to dignify it. "One bed," she said. "Don't overthink it." She went to unpack. I stood at the door with my bag and understood, somewhere below the level where I was willing to examine it directly, that I was in significant trouble. My name is James Calloway. I'm 35. I'm the head of market strategy for a mid-sized consumer brand that makes the kind of products that are useful enough to keep and not interesting enough to discuss at dinner parties, which I have always considered an honest way to spend a career. I am good at my job in the way that requires actual effort rather than natural aptitude. I work carefully. I think in systems. I revise things more than is strictly necessary. My colleagues find this reliable. My work rival finds it slow. Her name is Priya Mehta. 33. Senior Creative Director. She operates at a pace that is either genuinely efficient or performatively fast, and I have spent 18 months being unable to determine which. She presents ideas the way some people throw things, with precision, and without particular concern for what they hit. She is almost always right, which is the part I have never once mentioned out loud, because it would require a level of transparency I was not prepared to offer across a conference table. We met in a budget meeting in March of last year. She had come in with a campaign proposal that was good, actually good, not merely confident, and I had raised objections that were technically valid and also, I can admit now, partially motivated by the fact that I had arrived with a counterproposal and she had made mine look conservative before I'd opened the folder. We reached a compromise. It was her idea with my numbers, which she accepted without comment, and I resented without reason. The dynamic after that was the kind that develops between two people who respect each other professionally and have decided, by mutual unspoken agreement, not to examine why the professional tension feels more personal than it should. We disagreed in meetings with the fluency of people who had studied each other. We were polite in corridors with the precision of people who had decided the corridor was neutral territory. We had never had a conversation that wasn't about work. She carried a small burgundy notebook to every meeting. Not for notes, she typed those. The notebook was for something else I had never asked. It had a slight crease on the cover from where she'd folded it back on itself, and she turned it over in her hands when she was thinking, the way other people turn pens. I had noticed this in month 2 and filed it away the way I filed things I didn't know what to do with. I told myself, for 18 months, that I found her professionally challenging. This was accurate. It was also not the complete sentence. The retreat was 3 days at a resort, 2 hours from the city. The kind of corporate event that is described internally as a strategy off-site and functions in practice as a reminder that your colleagues have personalities outside of meeting rooms. There were 30 of us. There were workshops about alignment and sessions about roadmaps and an evening of organized social time that everyone attended with the energy of people who have decided to get through it efficiently. Priya had been on my schedule all week. We had a joint presentation on the final morning, a strategic overview that required us to appear in front of the executive team, as though our departments had been collaborating seamlessly for months. We had a draft. The draft was good. We had produced it over 3 weeks of email exchanges that were professionally productive and personally the tensest communication I have engaged in since a contract dispute in 2019. The flight down had been fine. The van from the airport had been fine. The check-in had been less fine, in the sense that the front desk apologized for a system error and informed us that our rooms had been double booked, and the only option, given that the rest of the resort was at capacity for a separate conference, was a single upgrade room. Singular, for the two of us. The front desk person looked between us with the specific expression of someone who has delivered bad news before and has learned to do so very quickly and then take a step back. Priya had looked at me. I had looked at her. "Fine," she said, to the desk, not to me. And that was the whole of the negotiation. I am not, by nature, someone who overthinks things. I am, by practice, someone who thinks things through carefully and at length, and then reaches a conclusion that a less methodical person might have arrived at faster. These are different. I have always maintained that they are different. Standing in a hotel room with my work rival in one bed and her instruction not to overthink it, I was overthinking it. She had changed into something comfortable. Soft trousers. A faded university sweater. The kind of clothes that say, "This is who I am," when the presentation is over. She was at the desk with her laptop and the burgundy notebook, working on something unrelated to the retreat. She had been there for 20 minutes. She had not acknowledged my continued presence near the window with any expression whatsoever, which is its own kind of statement. I unpacked. I worked. We occupied opposite ends of a king-size hotel room, with the concentrated civility of two people who are very aware of each other and have decided not to say so. At 9:30, she said, "The section on market segmentation is still weak." "I know," I said. "We should fix it before tomorrow." "I agree." She pulled the chair from the desk to the foot of the bed, set her laptop on the mattress, and looked at me across the room. "Come. And look at this." It was a reasonable request. It was also the first time in 18 months that either of us had said "come here" and meant it as an invitation rather than a challenge. I sat on the edge of the bed with the laptop between us and looked at the presentation. She was right about the segmentation section. I told her so. She looked at me sideways. "You never just agree," she said. "You're right," I said. "It's weak." She looked back at the screen. A small, almost suppressed thing happened at the corner of her mouth. "If you're going to start doing that," she said, "at least warn me." "Doing what?" "Being reasonable." "I'm always reasonable," I said. She laughed, quick, genuine, surprised by itself, not the professional version, something that arrived before she could manage it into something else, and she didn't quite manage to take it back. She looked at the screen. "The segmentation," she said. "Right," I said. "We worked for 2 hours. It was the best working session we'd had in 18 months, because we were sitting close enough that neither of us could perform anything. The dynamic was still there. She was still faster. I was still more careful. And where we disagreed, we reached the better version. But something about the room. The hour, the absence of a conference table between us, had taken the performance out of it. We were just two people working, which was all we'd ever been, and somehow that was the most interesting thing about the whole arrangement. At 11:30, she closed the laptop and leaned back against the headboard and looked at the ceiling. "That's better," she said. "Yes," I said. She turned her head and looked at me. I was still sitting at the foot of the bed, near the edge. She was at the headboard. The space between us was not enormous. "James," she said. "Priya," I said. "This isn't strange," she said. "I know," I said. "Good," she said. She got up, turned off the desk lamp, and went to her side of the bed. I went to mine. We lay in the dark in a room that was quiet, except for the distant sound of the other conference's evening event somewhere below us. It was not strange. It was the opposite of strange. That was the part I lay with for a long time before I slept. I have a reasonable capacity for self-deception. It has gotten me through a number of situations that required not examining things too closely. I am noting this because it is relevant. On the morning of the second day, I woke up at 6 a.m., looked at the ceiling, and understood with complete clarity that I had been wrong about myself for approximately 18 months. I had not been finding Priya Mehta professionally challenging. I had been, in the most methodical and thoroughly documented way available to me, falling for my work rival. In meetings, over email, across every conference table where she'd been too fast and too right and too good at the things she did. And I had filed all of it under competition because the alternative required a level of honesty I wasn't ready for. She was still asleep. I could hear her breathing, the slow rhythm of it, and I lay very still and thought about all the things I had called by the wrong name. The burgundy notebook was on the nightstand on her side. I hadn't noticed her put it there. I looked at the slight crease on the cover, the fold she'd made by pressing it back, and I thought about month 2 when I'd first noticed it. About how long I'd been cataloging things I told myself were irrelevant. I got up quietly and went to make coffee from the small machine on the dresser. She appeared 20 minutes later, hair not yet organized, the university sweater from the night before, and she stopped when she saw the second cup already waiting on her side of the dresser. She looked at it. Then, at me. "You made coffee," she said. "I made too much," I said. A beat. She knew that wasn't why. She picked up the cup, drank, said nothing, which was how I knew she'd heard it. The morning sessions were fine. The afternoon workshop was fine. We presented at 4 p.m., and it went well enough that the VP of Marketing used the word seamless, which Priya received without expression, and I received with the private knowledge that it was the least accurate word available. Productive, maybe. Combustible. Something that made better work out of friction. Not seamless. Not for a single day in 18 months. Afterward, in the corridor outside the conference room, she fell into step beside me. We walked back toward the lifts without discussing it. "Good session," she said. "Yes," I said. We reached the lift. She pressed the button. We waited. "The coffee this morning," she said, still looking at the doors. I said. "You didn't make too much." "No," I said. The lift arrived. We got in. The doors closed. She turned the burgundy notebook over in her hands once, set it still. "I've been thinking," she said, "about something you said in the Hartley Review. In November." I thought back. I said a lot of things in the Hartley Review. "You said..." She stopped. Started again. "You said the campaign was trying too hard to be noticed, that the best work doesn't ask for attention, it just earns it." "I remember," I said. "I disagreed with you at the time, I know. Loudly, I still disagree with you professionally," she said. "But I've been thinking about it, in other contexts." The lift stopped at our floor. The doors opened. Neither of us moved for a moment. Then she stepped out, and I followed, and we walked down the corridor without speaking. And I understood, with the particular clarity of a man who has spent 18 months being methodical about the wrong things, that she was telling me something. Indirectly, in the way she did everything that mattered. Letting it sit in the air between us, waiting to see if I caught it. She stopped at the door. Key card out. I said, "Priya." She looked at me. "I was talking about you," I said, "in the Hartley Review. I was thinking about you when I said it." She was very still. That's not something you say in a budget meeting, I said. No, she said quietly. I have been thinking about the wrong category for a long time, I said. I kept filing things under professional, and they kept not staying there. And I knew, I knew earlier than I told myself. I just needed to find a way to say it that felt like the right pace. She looked at me. Something moved through her expression. Not the boardroom version, not the retreat version. Something underneath both of those. Something she had been keeping filed under a different name as well. You think everything at the wrong pace, she said. I know, I said. 18 months, she said. I'm thorough, I said. She looked at me for a moment longer. Then she pressed the key card to the door. Come inside, she said. I'm going to tell you something, and I'd rather not do it in a corridor. Inside, she set the notebook on the nightstand, turned to face me. She had the expression of someone who has been fast at everything for a long time and has made a deliberate decision to be slow about this one thing. I have been professional, she said, with an enormous amount of effort. For 18 months. And I would like to stop. I crossed the room. She didn't step back. The notebook, I said. She looked at it, then at me. What about it? She said. What's it for? I said. Not the meetings, the other thing. A pause. She reached over and opened it, turned it to face me. Inside, in her handwriting, dense, precise, the kind that doesn't waste space, were lines. Not notes, not copy. Something closer to thinking out loud. Ideas half-formed and worked through. The private version of the fast mind I'd been watching across conference tables. She watched me read a page. No one sees that, she said, quietly. I know, I said. I'm showing you, she said. I looked at her. She held my gaze without looking away, the most still I had ever seen her, the speed entirely absent. Just her looking at me like she was offering something she didn't give to anyone else and waiting to see what I did with it. I took her hand. She looked down at it, then back up. I'd like to stop being professional too, I said. She laughed. Small, real, the surprised kind that arrived before her guard. And then she stepped forward, and I put my arms around her, and she went still in the particular way people go still when they have finally put something down they've been carrying for a long time. From down the hall, the noise of the retreat's final evening social drifted under the door. Voices, music, the sound of 30 colleagues being team-building somewhere in the vicinity of a bar. She laughed again, quietly, against my shoulder. We're missing the social event, she said. Terrible, I said. We'll have to explain ourselves tomorrow. We'll say we were working on the segmentation, I said. That's an outright lie, she said. I'm branching out, I said. She pulled back just enough to look at me. The corner of her mouth did the thing. She reached up and held my face in her hands for a moment. Something careful, something considered, like everything she did. And then she kissed me, which was also, it turned out, something she did with complete precision and no wasted motion whatsoever. I have always found that efficient. 5 months later, when the new account director asked how we worked so well together, Priya said it was because we argued about everything before we agreed, and the argument made the agreement better. He nodded like that was a management principle. She didn't look at me. I looked at the table. We were, between us, an extremely contained amount of entertained. In August, she moved the burgundy notebook from her desk to mine. I didn't ask why. The next day there was a second one on my desk, a gray one, same size, with a note in her handwriting that said, "Now you have to show me yours." I still have the note. The segmentation section became the strongest part of the presentation. The VP used it in a slide deck 3 months later, attributed to our joint department, which I consider a reasonable summary of how everything has worked since. Her instincts, my structure, and the particular quality of work that comes out of two people who understand each other well enough to disagree fast and land somewhere neither of them could have reached alone. She is still faster than me. I have stopped pretending this is a flaw. She has stopped pretending she doesn't find my thoroughness useful, which took slightly longer but arrived in the same place. Nothing about what we turned out to be surprised either of us. Once we stopped filing it wrong, it had been there in every meeting room, every email, every moment one of us was faster or more careful than the other needed, and neither of us looked away. I just needed to stop overthinking it.